Nero, the emperor who turned a boy into an empress. In 67 AD, Emperor Nero, the most powerful ruler of the Roman Empire, appeared in public alongside his newly crowned empress. She was radiant, draped in the finest silks, her posture graceful, and her presence commanding the gaze of everyone in the forum. Yet, behind the murmurs of admiration lay hushed whispers, a scandalous truth that she had once been a boy. This shocking revelation sent ripples through Roman society, blurring the lines between love, obsession, and cruelty. It marked the beginning of a grim chapter in history, where the emperor's desires overpowered morality, and a young life was forever altered to fulfill his vision of a lost love reborn. Part 1. Nero, from a promising young ruler to a man corrupted by power. In 54 AD, the young Nero, only 16 years old, unexpectedly became emperor of Rome following the death of his adoptive father, Emperor Claudius. The event shook the entire empire, but at the same time ignited hope among the people for a new, brighter era. The image of the handsome, youthful, and energetic emperor appearing before the public made thousands believe that Rome was about to enter a radiant, golden age. From the very first days of his reign, Nero introduced a series of reforms that won the hearts of the people. He reduced taxes for farmers and merchants, abolished many unfair fees that had long burdened daily life, and kept Rome's forums, theaters, and arenas open for frequent events. Chariot races, games, music performances, and theatrical plays, all free of charge, bringing joy and relief to the common folk. Nero also showed a remarkable interest in culture and the arts. He encouraged the flourishing of poetry, music, and theater, even taking part in performances himself. This created the image of a close, youthful emperor, entirely different from his stern and distant predecessors. At that time, the Romans saw Nero as a symbol of renewal, a ruler brimming with vitality, creativity, and the desire to bring peace and prosperity to the empire. But absolute power is a double-edged sword. When every word is taken as truth, when no one dares to oppose, and when the court is filled with flatterers bowing in submission, a ruler's mind begins to change. The pride of a young emperor slowly turned into boundless arrogance. The constant praise of the people and the fearful obedience of his officials convinced Nero that he could never be wrong. His obsession with power and his hunger for admiration and adoration began to cloud his reason. From a beloved young ruler, Nero gradually transformed into a man who craved control over everything, willing to abandon the very values that had once earned him the people's love, just to satisfy his personal ambitions. From here, the path leading Nero from the peak of glory to the depths of cruelty and tragedy had begun. Part 2. The love affair with Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea Sabina, the woman who captivated the entire city of Rome, was born into a prestigious noble family, blessed with both natural beauty and sharp intellect. From a young age, she had been the center of attention among the Roman elite. Her skin was white as ivory, her golden hair meticulously groomed, her deep blue eyes captivating, and her graceful movements like those of a goddess from legend. No gaze could turn away from her. Yet what made Poppaea truly dangerous was not her beauty, but her intelligence and burning ambition, a powerful thirst for power hidden behind every soft smile. Before meeting Nero, Poppaea had married Otho, a wealthy young nobleman and a close friend of the emperor. That marriage was not born of love, but rather a calculated move to step deeper into Rome's circles of power. But when Poppaea's eyes met Nero's, she saw a far greater opportunity than anything Otho could offer: the throne and the ultimate power of being Empress of Rome. Nero, already accustomed to seeing himself as the center of the universe, was instantly enchanted by Poppaea. It was not only her dazzling beauty that drew him in, but also her wit, charm, and the way her words could disarm even the most guarded listener. From their earliest encounters, Nero fell into an inescapable infatuation. He spent hours each day simply talking with her, gazing at her, or remaining in her presence, neglecting state affairs and treating the governance of the empire as a secondary concern. Nero's love for Poppaea quickly morphed into an extreme obsession. He wanted her to belong to him completely, to always be within his sight, to control every word she spoke and every step she took. But to make Poppaea his official wife, Nero faced a significant obstacle: Empress Octavia, his lawful wife, daughter of Emperor Claudius, and a living symbol of Roman virtue. Octavia was loved by the people for her kindness, humility, and noble demeanor. She had never been touched by scandal and was regarded as the model of royal womanhood. This made the idea of publicly discarding her extremely risky from a political standpoint. Yet Poppaea, with her skillful persuasion, planted in Nero's mind the belief that Octavia was the only barrier preventing them from being together. False accusations of adultery, without any proof, were fabricated to tarnish Octavia's reputation. In the end, she was exiled to the island of Pandateria, a place of cold winds and loneliness. But exile was not enough. Under Poppaea's pressure, Nero ordered Octavia's execution, bringing an end to a figure once revered across the empire. Her death enraged the people, but Nero ignored all criticism, exchanging it for a lavish wedding that crowned Poppaea as empress. From that moment, Poppaea held nearly all the soft power of the imperial court. Every important decision, whether political or personal, bore her influence to some extent. Yet alongside that power came Nero's suffocating control. He grew jealous of every glance others cast her way, even resenting those who had known her before. This romance, beneath the glittering facade of the throne, was in truth an invisible chain binding them both, passionate yet stifling, and filled with the seeds of inevitable tragedy. Part 3. The Fateful Rage. In 65 AD, the Roman Empire was still at the height of its power, but inside the palace, the relationship between Nero and Poppaea Sabina had become suffocatingly tense. Their love, once ignited by passionate desire, had now been warped by control, jealousy, and the emperor's sudden bursts of anger. At the time, Poppaea was pregnant, carrying the hope of an heir to the Roman throne. This should have been the couple's greatest joy, but instead, it became a tragedy. One fateful evening, amid a heated argument, Nero, infamous for his volatile temper, lost all control. Harsh words escalated, and in a moment of blind rage, he struck Poppaea. The fatal blow fell upon the woman he had once worshipped, and she collapsed instantly. Blood stained the marble floor, and in that same moment, the life of the unborn child was also extinguished. Poppaea's death sent shockwaves through the imperial court. No one dared question the emperor, but the silence made the palace colder than ever. Nero, though the very cause of the tragedy, fell into deep despair. He refused to accept that Poppaea was gone forever. To preserve her memory, he ordered the construction of one of the most lavish tombs in Rome, built from white marble and adorned with exquisite reliefs depicting her at the height of her beauty. Not stopping there, Nero held a grand ceremony, proclaiming Poppaea a goddess. He commanded the people to burn incense, offer sacrifices, and sing hymns in her honor. Yet, deep down, these acts were not truly to glorify a departed empress, but to convince himself that she had never really left him. From that moment on, the emperor lived in persistent delusions. At times, he would speak aloud in the palace, imagining Poppaea sitting beside him, listening intently. Sometimes he ordered banquets to be prepared, arranging a seat for the Empress, as though she still walked among the living. For Nero, time had forever frozen at the moment before that fateful rage took everything away. From here, his mind began its irreversible descent into the abyss. Part 4. The Appearance of Sporus. After the tragic death of Poppaea Sabina, the Roman imperial palace was shrouded in an atmosphere of grief, coldness, and haunting memories. Nero, though still cloaked in the guise of imperial authority, had become a different man, his mind constantly haunted by visions of his lost wife. Every lavish banquet, every gentle melody, and every flicker of lamplight brought back memories of Poppaea, pulling him deeper into pain and delusion. It was during this time that a remarkable figure entered his life, Sporus. The boy, then only about 14 or 15, was an ordinary palace slave with no noble birth or notable status. But Sporus possessed something that left the entire court astonished. His face bore an uncanny, almost chilling resemblance to Poppaea. His eyes, the shape of his lips, the delicate bridge of his nose, everything seemed like a younger replica of the late Empress. Those in the palace whispered that it was an extraordinary coincidence, while some even claimed it was a sign of fate. As for Nero, from the very first moment he laid eyes on Sporus, he could not look away. His heart, still aching from loss, felt as though it had found a strange escape, a chance to bring Poppaea back to life. From that moment on, Nero treated Sporus unlike any other slave. He gave him the finest clothing, ensured his meals were of the highest quality, and trained him to walk, speak, and even mimic facial expressions exactly like Poppaea. Those who witnessed it could not suppress a shiver, for they understood that Nero no longer saw Sporus as his own person, but as a mirror reflecting the image of the Empress he had lost. The arrival of Sporus was not only a bizarre twist in palace life, but also a sign that Nero's mind had strayed far down the path of obsession and delusion. In his eyes, Poppaea had never truly died, she had merely returned in the form of a young boy. And from here, an even stranger and more shocking story was about to unfold. Part 5, The Horrifying Operation. As Nero's obsession with the image of Poppaea grew deeper, the boundary between reality and illusion in his mind all but vanished. To him, Sporus was not merely a boy who resembled Poppaea. He had to become Poppaea. And to achieve that, Nero issued a command so cruel and cold-blooded that it struck fear into the entire court. Sporus would be castrated, transformed into a female forever. In ancient Roman society, castration was not unheard of, but to perform it on a healthy adolescent boy for the sole purpose of turning him into the replica of a dead woman was unprecedented. Nero's order was delivered as an unchallengeable sentence. Sporus, merely a slave, had no right to refuse, no voice to defend his body or his fate. The process of castration in Rome was pure torment. There was no modern anesthesia, no sterilization, and the risk of death was extremely high. The body was cut open, blood flowed in torrents, and the agony could last for weeks. With every stroke of the blade, a part of Sporus's identity was erased. With every cry of pain, the inhuman cruelty of absolute power was laid bare. Yet, Sporus survived, not because of Nero's mercy, but thanks to his own extraordinary endurance and the skill of those carrying out the emperor's orders. As his wounds healed, Sporus lost forever the biological traits of a man. His body changed, his voice softened, his appearance grew more delicate, exactly as Nero had desired. From that moment on, Sporus's true identity was buried. In Nero's eyes, he was no longer an individual, with no past and no future, only Poppaea reborn. And this was merely the first step in the bizarre chain of actions Nero was about to impose upon him. Part 6, The Emperor's Wedding to a False Empress. After Sporus endured the brutal castration and lost his identity as a man, Nero wasted no time in transforming him into the perfect embodiment of Poppaea Sabina. But this time, he would go beyond mere physical transformation. He wanted to recreate their former marriage exactly as it had been. In a shocking decision, Nero declared that he would marry Sporus in a ceremony identical to his wedding with Poppaea years before. Nero gave Sporus a new name, Sabina, erasing his former identity entirely. He was dressed in fine sheer silk gowns, crafted by Rome's most skilled artisans. The jewelry that had once belonged to Poppaea, gold necklaces, jeweled hairpins, emerald bracelets, was brought out and placed upon Sporus, as though draping him in the very memories and spirit of the deceased empress. Nero even ordered the palace maids and court etiquette tutors to train Sporus in every detail. The graceful way to walk, the dignified manner of sitting, the tilt of the head, the precise smile, the subtle sideways glance. Everything had to be exactly like Poppaea. He learned to speak softly, to hold a silk fan with poise, and to use powders and rouge to soften his face, radiating the aristocratic allure of a noblewoman. On the wedding day, the Roman palace was adorned as splendidly as it had been for Poppaea. Torches blazed, incense drifted along marble halls, and roses and white lilies lined the ceremonial path. Nero, clad in the purple and gold imperial robe, took the hand of his bride Sabina and led him forward before the gathered officials and imperial guards. Music played, blessings rang out, but in the hearts of many witnesses, this was no true wedding, but a strange, extravagant, and chilling performance. From that day on, Sporus, now Sabina, was treated as the official empress. He sat beside Nero at banquets, accompanied him in processions, and even appeared with him on the palace balcony to greet the people. But it was all an illusion born from Nero's obsession and from the cruel truth that Sporus's life, name, and true self had been forever buried beneath layers of silk and gold. Part 7, The 2-Year Performance. After the grotesque wedding, Sporus, now called Sabina, officially became the empress in name of the Roman Empire. To the citizens, the sight was both familiar and unsettling. A face and demeanor identical to Poppaea Sabina, yet beneath the layers of silk and gold jewelry was the body of a young boy forced to lose himself. For 2 years, at every imperial event, Sporus was required to appear by Nero's side. From lavish banquets with senators, blazing religious festivals, to triumphant parades in the public square, the Empress always stood next to the Emperor, smiling at the crowd and raising a hand in greeting like a symbol of power and splendor. But behind that smile was a life turned into pure theater. Every morning, Sporus had to put on a long silk gown, fasten around his neck the pearl necklace that once belonged to Poppaea, and apply makeup to soften his face, not into his own features, but into the face of the dead woman. Every gesture, every glance, every smile was rehearsed and controlled, all to maintain Nero's illusion that Poppaea was still alive beside him. Nero often recounted to Sabina the stories of Poppaea as if they were reliving memories together. He would speak of journeys, banquets, and whispered words in the night, all of the moments he had truly shared with the real Poppaea. Sporus could only remain silent, nod, and play the role of the emperor's deceased wife. Even in private, the performance never ended. Sporus lived like a ghost, without a past, without a future, existing only to sustain the fantasy of the man who ruled all. 2 years stretched on like a lifetime, and with each passing day, another piece of himself faded away. In Nero's eyes, this was a love resurrected. But to Sporus, it was a prison without walls, where the chains were the memories of a dead woman he was forced to become. Part 8. When the empire collapsed in 68 AD, Rome was engulfed in an unprecedented political storm. Years of brutal rule, extravagant and reckless indulgence, merciless executions, and Nero's disdain for tradition had fueled outrage across the empire. Provinces rebelled, and the army, the very foundation of imperial power, turned against him one by one. Even the Senate, long accustomed to bowing to his will, openly sided with the insurgents. The Golden Palace, once a symbol of Nero's limitless authority, now stood empty. Friends, courtiers, and flatterers who had once praised him like a god quietly vanished. Across the city, rumors swirled that the rebel forces were closing in. In panic, Nero fled into the night, stripped of any trace of imperial dignity. He took refuge in a villa on the outskirts, but the sound of galloping hooves drew nearer. When he learned he would soon be captured and executed publicly, Nero chose to take his own life. Before collapsing, he uttered his final words, "I am an artist, and now I die like an artist." The empire entered an era of chaos, and Nero's name would forever be tied to decadence and ruin. But for Sporus, Nero's death brought no liberation. The days of living as Poppaea Sabina continued, only under a different master. To the victors, he was not a person, but a rare political trophy. General Nymphidius Sabinus, who quickly seized control of Rome, saw Sporus as the ultimate proof that he had inherited the entirety of Nero's legacy, not just the throne, but the Empress as well. Sabinus planned a grand wedding, parading Sporus before the public in silk gowns and Poppaea's jewelry, as if to recreate the golden age of Nero, but under a new ruler. To him, this was a way to assert dominance and feed his vanity, with no regard for Sporus's feelings or fate. Deep inside, Sporus had become nothing more than an empty shadow. 2 years of living under a false identity had eroded his soul. Every word spoken, every gesture made, every forced smile before the crowd was part of an endless performance. And though Nero was gone, Sporus remained trapped in the same role with no escape, like a bird moved to a new cage, but never set free. Part 9. The Tragic End. After Nero's death, Rome entered the Year of the Four Emperors, an unprecedented time of chaos when supreme power changed hands several times in just a few months. Sporus, who had long since lost any sense of freedom, was passed around like a trophy between rival factions vying for the throne. He no longer had his real name, his childhood, or his future. He was only Poppaea Sabina, in the eyes of those who wished to use that image to adorn their new reign. General Nymphidius Sabinus, the first to intend to make Sporus his own symbol, was betrayed and killed by his own soldiers. Sporus then fell into the hands of Otho, one of the short-lived successors to the throne. Otho had once been a friend, then a romantic rival to Nero, and he too forced Sporus to live as his Empress, as if to avenge the past and gratify his own pride. But Otho's reign collapsed after only 3 months. When Vitellius came to power, Sporus's tragedy reached its peak. Vitellius had no interest in maintaining appearances like Nero or Otho. Known for his cruelty, he took pleasure in humiliating others. Sporus, with his delicate beauty and strange story, became the perfect target for a public spectacle Vitellius planned to entertain the masses. According to Roman sources, Vitellius intended to drag Sporus into the arena and force him to play the role of a bride in a reenactment of the marriage of the goddess Persephone, ending with him being attacked by a beast before thousands of spectators. Facing that fate, Sporus knew that if he lived, he would continue to be turned into a horrifying plaything for power. With no way out and no one left to protect him, he chose the only path to free himself: suicide. In 69 AD, not yet 20 years old, Sporus ended his short life, one filled with unbearable pain and humiliation. The death of Sporus closed a dark chapter in Roman history, where a human being was stripped of identity, dignity, and life itself, just to satisfy the desires and political games of those in power. At the same time, it left behind a chilling reminder of the price a person pays when reduced to a pawn in the hands of absolute authority. Part 10. A lesson from history. The story of Sporus is not merely a personal tragedy, but a stark reflection of the dark side of absolute power, a force which, when left unchecked, destroys both human beings and humanity itself. Sporus, an anonymous boy in the Roman imperial palace, was swept into the brutal whirlpool of politics and twisted personal desires. He was never asked for his opinion, never allowed to choose his own future. Simply because he bore an uncanny resemblance to the late Empress Poppaea, he became the victim of Emperor Nero's sick obsession, a man who wielded supreme authority yet allowed himself to sink into depravity and cruelty. Nero not only stole Sporus's youth and body, but also stripped away his very identity. The brutal act of castration was only the first step in transforming Sporus into a living Poppaea. From his clothes, voice, gestures, to even the look in his eyes, everything was forced to replicate a woman who was already dead. In Nero's eyes, Sporus was not a person, but merely the embodiment of a memory he wanted to possess forever. For 2 years, Sporus had to appear beside Nero as an official empress, attending ceremonies, banquets, and sitting on the imperial platform during major events of the empire. Every moment was a forced performance, an existence that was never his own. His life ceased to be life. It became an invisible prison built from power and obsession. When Nero died in 68 AD, many believed Sporus would finally be freed. But reality proved harsher. No longer the empress of the empire, he became a political trophy, a possession fought over by new power factions. They did not see Sporus as a human being with emotions, pain, and dignity, only as a symbol to flaunt or ridicule. The final humiliation came in 69 AD, when Sporus faced the prospect of being dragged into a public spectacle, an unbearable form of degradation. Confronted with this fate, he chose to take his own life in his early 20s, ending a life that had never truly been his. The lesson history leaves behind is painfully clear. Absolute power is a double-edged sword, and in the hands of the immoral, it can crush both the body and the soul. Sporus was the victim of a system where a single human life was worth nothing compared to the fleeting whims of those in power. But this story also reveals another truth. Absolute power does not only destroy its victims, it transforms its wielder into a monster, stripping them of empathy and humanity. More than 2 millennia have passed, yet the message remains as urgent as ever. In any era, in any nation, if power is concentrated in the hands of one person or a small group without checks and balances, tragedies like that of Sporus can happen again. History has shown that when human rights and dignity are disregarded, death and suffering become nothing more than meaningless numbers to those who rule. And that is precisely why every civilized society must remain vigilant to ensure such dark chapters of history are never repeated. This is not just the story of the fate of an individual named Sporus, but also a warning that echoes throughout human history. When power goes unchecked, it can twist even the most beautiful emotions, like love, into sick obsessions. Worse still, those who hold such power may see other people merely as tools to satisfy their fantasies, personal desires, or to feed their own distorted egos. Love, which should be about mutual sharing and respect, was warped by Nero into a game of possession. In his eyes, Sporus was not an independent human being with emotions, thoughts, and the right to choose. He was merely the shadow of a deceased empress, a living image meant to fill the void in the mind of the ruler. This distortion not only robbed Sporus of his youth, but also erased the humanity within Nero himself, turning love into a cruel, cold, and selfish form of power. This story reveals a bitter truth. When power is concentrated absolutely in the hands of one person, laws, morality, and even human rights can be broken. The obsessions and desires of that individual become the law for everyone else, while the fate of others is reduced to that of mere pawns, moved, used, or discarded at will. More than 2,000 years have passed, yet the message remains unchanged. Similar tragedies can still occur in any era where power goes unchecked and human beings are treated as means rather than ends. This is why civilized societies must always establish mechanisms to control power, protect human dignity, and safeguard the rights of every individual, so that no one has to become the Sporus of the modern age.